Jet Middleton, you are 18 years old, a high school senior, and you're going to be playing at University of Arizona
Yes,
in the
ma'am.
fall. Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you.
And you train here with Chris Lewis and Chuck Brymer at the Brymer Lewis Academy in Irvine.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell us a little bit about how long you've been here?
Yeah, so I've been here a year. I've been training in Newport for 3 years, and so I'm from Colorado. And yeah, so Chuck kind of took me under his wing in January of last year, and yeah.
How did you get connected?
So I was training at a different academy here in Newport for a couple of years, and I just kind of wanted a change. And one of my friends was training here, and he said, "Come try it." And I tried it for a week, and I just fell in love with the coaches here and the atmosphere.
Who do you hit with on a day-to-day basis?
So my coach right now is Micah Clausia. He's actually on court over there, but I work with him 4 hours a day. He helps me with fitness mostly, also match play and things like that.
So 4 hours a day, which means that you are not in brick and mortar school, right?
Yeah, I do online school. It kind of allows me to train a little bit more, but still get a good education and study a decent amount a day.
Which online program do you go to?
I'm right now in Connexus, and my first 3 years I was at Stanford Online.
Cool. Do you have any idea what you want to study in college?
Yeah, I'm gonna do business finance.
Awesome. Talk a little bit about how you got started playing tennis and what sparked your passion for the sport.
So my dad was a college basketball player, and my mom, was an athlete also growing up. So it was kind of I already knew that when I was young that I was going to be an athlete. It just depended on which sport. So, I played a lot of sports, and my sister was a very good tennis player. She's a 4-star recruit. She had a chance to play college tennis. So, I kind of fell in love with it. I just wanted to be better than her. And then once she stopped playing, there was like kind of this weird just competitiveness that I had, and I fell in love with the sport, and I just wanted to get better. So I kind of just kept playing with it, and I got a lot better, and I quit my other sports and then pursued it.
What precipitated the move from Colorado to Southern Cal?
So in Colorado, there's not much competition there, and also the coaches are a little bit more about making money and not much about developing players and getting them better. But they're just more about making money, and I kind of wanted to move. But I was originally in Florida when I was 12, training at an academy in Florida. But at 13 I moved here to SoCal after a year of training in Florida because I wanted to be a little bit closer to home and my parents.
So you're here by yourself?
I was for 6 months, but now my parents are living out here for 6 months right before I go to college, so they can spend more time with me because I've lived by myself since I was like 12 years old. So,
wow.
Yeah.
And what do you see as your goals with your tennis?
I have like long-term goals, like to play all the slams and things like that. But I'm just focused on a day at a time right now, just trying to get as good as I can before I go to school. Because once I get to school, it's kind of just a different atmosphere. You play as a team, you play for your team, you compete to win a national championship rather than winning a tournament here, a tournament there. You're competing under one goal to win a national championship, and I think right now it's just day by day to get it as good as possible right now before I go to school, so I can help my team hopefully win a national championship.
What are your expectations for your tennis during your 4 years at Arizona?
I've tried not to have any expectations because sometimes expectations can hurt, especially young juniors. I think I struggled with that when I was younger, and it's hard to put tennis in perspective when you have really, really heavy and hard expectations. But if you can kind of get rid of the expectations, I think it helps me a lot. So I'm just going to go there, work as hard as I possibly can, do everything my coach asked me, and just compete because I'm a competitive person. I really like the team at U of A. All my buddies are on the team, so I think we'll have a good team and a good chance at doing really well as long as we just keep working hard every day.
Were you looking at other schools during your recruiting process?
Yeah, so I went on a couple visits. I was looking at SEC schools, Pac-12 schools. I was looking at other schools, but I kind of fell in love with I committed on my visit at U of A. So once he made me the offer, I was ready to go. It was a big commitment for them to kind of take me on because I was kind of a project. I think I wasn't as good when I was younger, and I kind of just worked my butt off and got to where I am today. So, but it's more about the next year where I can kind of improve and get better. So,
What's your favorite part of your game?
I think my competitiveness. I'm gonna be out there until the person's gonna have to beat me. I'm not gonna give them anything. I'm a pretty big guy, so I try to stay as aggressive as possible, come forward, dictate with my forehand, but I'm gonna do everything I can to win.
Is there a professional player that you model your game after?
Yeah, I really, really like Kyle Edmund. I've watched him since he first started, and I kind of try to play like him, mentally, and because he's very good mentally and he's very strong physically. So, got a big forehand, big serve, moves well for how big he is, and we're about the same size, a little taller than him. But I try to play like him as much as possible.
Can you share with us what a typical day looks like for you out here at the Brymer Lewis Academy?
Yeah. So, like for instance, today I woke up. I had a mental session with my mental coach, and he works with like the Baylor men's tennis team and some other like Dabo Swinney. I worked with him at 6 a.m. and then I had yoga from 7 to 8, and then 8 to 9 I had fitness, and then 9:15 I'm out on court for 2 hours, and then I have school for 3 hours, and then I'm coming back at 2 to get back on that, and then I have ACT practice at 7. So that's kind of the daily life. It's busy. You don't really have much time for socialization or anything of that sort. So it's a good process, but it's also very taxing on the mentally and physically. So you kind of have to make sure that you're in the right mindset to be able to do that.
How long have you been working with your mental coach?
Not this mental coach. I've only been working with him for like a month because I recently had some struggles mentally, but I was working with a mental coach when I was 14 for about a year, and he helped me a lot. But now it's more about, I think my mental coach has started to kind of teach me that you have to be able to put tennis in a perspective, because tennis isn't everything that matters. And I think a lot of parents can put tennis first, and I think it needs to be more about your education, your health mentally before tennis, because if you put tennis first, then your everything else is going to suffer. Your socialization, your mental health, your relationship with your family, and for me it was kind of my relationship with God that was kind of struggling with that. And then I kind of had to put tennis into perspective because I was putting it first, and I was so worried about it a lot. And I think parents are the main reason why that happens, and I don't blame my parents for it, because I just was so into it that they wanted me to succeed. So they weren't pushing me, but they were like trying to do everything they could to get better. And I think that was kind of a lot of, it put pressure on me not only, but I put pressure on myself, but it put pressure on them to help me to get better. And that was partially my fault and partially their fault. So you kind of, as a parent, you have to put tennis in perspective, and that's when you're really going to do your best, because you do everything you can to work to get better, but you got to realize that tennis isn't everything. Even if you make it, you're only playing tennis unless you're like Fed, you're only playing tennis until you're 34. If you're top 10 in the world, it's a physical sport. So, and that's not even half your life. So you kind of have to put it in perspective. I know it's a big part of a lot of juniors' lives, but it's not everything.
If you could go back and talk to your 12-year-old self, what advice would you give him?
I would tell him, a lot of things that I'm still learning today, like be a little bit tougher. When you're tired, that's when it's mattered most. Like, I've only recently started to kind of build my fitness up a lot, and you get the best when you're tired, when you're exhausted, when you're sore, and you work through it and you play sets and compete. When you're tired and sore, that's when you get your best. Like, that's when you compete the hardest and when you're able to improve the most. So I would tell my 12-year-old self to keep pushing and work a little bit harder, be a little bit tougher mentally, but mainly just focus on every time you step on the court, one goal, what you want to do, and put tennis in a perspective. Everything, it doesn't matter as much as you think it might matter, but if you really want to do it right, just every time you step on the court or in the gym or, in the classroom, just do your best, and that's all you can do.
I haven't heard you make any reference to your ranking, your UTR, your TRN. How important are those numbers to you?
So when I was younger, I was really focused on it. I think it was a big part of my growth because I was a little bit obsessive over it. I would look at tennis recruiting and UTR and USTA, and I still follow ATP, all those rankings and stuff, and I watch every match I can. I'm watching the Aussie at night until 11:30, but UTR and tennis recruiting doesn't matter. You see like these pros, like most of the guys that were on tennis recruiting that like made it, they weren't like number one, and some of them were, but a lot of the guys that are doing well in college, were 4 stars, maybe 3 stars sometimes, so I think it doesn't really matter at all. I think you can use it as, I think it's good for college coaches to kind of see where their players are and things like that, but it fluctuates because when you move around the world and stuff, UTRs are inflated or deflated, higher, lower than they should be, and so I think sometimes it's very accurate. I think it's a good system. Their idea is very good, but I think junior players, it's really, really toxic for junior players because it can take over your mind. I know friends that, when we get together, that's all they talk about. They're like, "What's your UTR? What's your UTR?" And that's very toxic to me, at least. And
how did you get past that?
I still haven't. It's a very hard thing because you want your ranking to be, oh yeah, I want to be a blue chip. Like that was my goal at the beginning of 2019. So, but once I started obsessing over it, I was like, this is so stupid. Like it doesn't matter. It's something also you can't really control because if a guy's lower ranked than you and he plays really well, like, and he's playing like a blue chip, like, tennis recruiting doesn't know that, or UTR doesn't know that. And what if you wake up sick one day? And there's a lot of things that go into it, but I think I don't think it necessarily matters to look at or anything. You just have to focus on getting better as a player and as a person as a whole. It's not just about tennis or your tennis recruiting, UTR, things like that. So.
Well, I think UTR will be happy to hear you say that because that's one of their big pushes is trying to help players and parents understand the importance of going out and making those small improvements every single day.
Yeah.
Rather than focusing on the number.
Yeah, I think the idea of UTR is actually really smart. It's kind of a thing where you can see what exactly you're going up against, and I think it's also good for academies to use. Like here, during the academy they use UTR to put placements at the beginning of the day, but like you see a lot of kids that are the higher UTRs, they're ending on court 3, when they started on court 1. So it doesn't really matter, especially in practice where players play different than they do in matches. So UTR is a very good system. I think it can be used to your advantage, but it can also be a huge disadvantage. And I think there's a lot more negatives to UTR for junior players than there are positives. But for maybe league players or things like that, it's very, very good, and even college, it's very good. So if you're playing 1 and you don't know how good their 1 is, you can look it up and say, okay, this is what I'm going up against. But it's very it can be very toxic if you obsess over it, and if you have a obsessive personality like myself.
Like most tennis players.
Yeah, like most tennis players. I think it's a common trait for tennis players to be obsessive and compulsive. So. If like most junior tennis players, especially, like, if that's what you're focused on, you're not gonna improve.
If you could give one piece of advice to the tennis parents out there, what would it be?
Put everything in perspective. My parents have struggled with it, and sometimes they still struggle with it, but they try their best to improve. Put tennis into perspective. Tennis doesn't mean everything, and if you want your kid to get better, put him in the right position. You can't expect your kid to get better if, like, you can't blame your kid not getting better if you right before a big tournament take a vacation or something like that, or you got to put your kid in the best position to succeed. So whatever that is, whether it's traveling and doing online school like myself, or staying at home and going to regular school and being a normal kid, because some kids thrive off that and they wouldn't do so well in the online school. So if you kind of have to read your child's needs,
Mm-hmm.
and especially when they're younger, put them in a lot of sports, because if they can burn out easily. I played like 6-7 sports when I was until I was 12 years old, so that helped a lot with the perspective. But once you get really focused on tennis and you take a long, like, and you really want to be really good, that's when it can become a little bit toxic, because tennis is a very, very hard sport. It causes a lot of mental up and downs, and can cause even some anxiety and depression, like I've experienced myself. But it's getting rid of those thoughts. Okay, tennis, if I don't make it, like, what am I worth? You have a lot more meaning than just tennis. So